going to do our May, I almost said April, our May TBR for 2024. How is it already May? I don't know. I have a robust TBR as usual, but I am taking it with a very, very hefty grain of salt because in April so far, I have only read 3 books. And if you've been around for a while, you know that is very rare for me. That's a very low number of books for this point in the month. So I have a feeling that a lot of the books that I still really want to read, I just haven't had the time or energy to do it. I have a feeling that a lot of the books in April are going to be rolled over into May and probably June. I don't know, just a busy time of life, I guess. A lot going on besides reading, even though I really do want to read. I don't know what the second half of the month will feel like, reading-wise. I'm in the midst of many great and wonderful books, but I'm not finishing very much at all. And the 3 that I have finished are so vastly different from each other. Wait until you see the wrap-up. So yeah, it is what it is. This is the plan. These are the hopes and the dreams, and also probably a ton of stuff from last month's TBR will be read in the next couple of months as well. So let's just dive into it. We've got Bean's Big Book Bash. This is a thick book month, and so I'm going into The Shadow of What Was Lost by James Islington. This is big, crazy, wild, epic fantasy. It's part of a trilogy. It's the first book in a trilogy. I lived in an apartment building downtown 5 years ago, almost 5 years ago, and they had a little free library in the building. And someone there read really great books and put them on the building shelves all the time. And I also put books on the building shelves all the time. So pretty much this stranger and I basically exchanged books for a year without ever meeting each other. This is one of their books. I got from them the first and the second book in this series. I figured, hey, they're both there. They're both free. I might as well grab them in case I love them. And if I don't, they're in great shape and I can put them in a different little free library. So finally diving into this. Don't know much about it. From what I understand, it is epic high fantasy, which means this first book is going to have a ton of world building, a ton of setting the scene and giving me the rules. But also I think there's some good relationship building, some good characterization in here. I think that from the front I can tell it's about a group. I think it's students. I think there's a school involved in this. People are probably watching me going, because this isn't new. People are probably like, she knows nothing. And it's true. I know nothing. I really do. So I'm just going to go into this and see where it takes me. I'm kind of craving it, something to really like dig down deep into. Very different from my normal reading, and yeah, looking forward to it. So this is Bean's Big Book Bash for the month. I've told you nothing about it that is reliable, but that's okay. I'll tell you about it in the wrap up. For my classic this month, I do have a physical copy of this, and for whatever reason, I could not find it this morning and finally just sat down and was like, I'll find it later. I have a whole half a month to find it, and I'll just put a picture up for today. So it is the Iliad, which means that in June, I will be reading the Odyssey. Fingers crossed I get them both done. I haven't even started Aurora Leigh, the classic for April yet. So we'll see where we are. But the plan is that this month I'm reading the Iliad. If it's quite thick, I'm hoping that that's mostly notes. And next month it will be the Odyssey. I have listened to the Iliad and listened to a Great Courses discussion. If it wasn't actually Great Courses, it was a Great Courses-esque discussion that I got from my library audio collection several years ago. And I remembered really finding some things in this fascinating, particularly about storytelling and hero's journey. And at the time I was teaching a course that required a hefty look into hero's journey, which I have problems with, but who am I to judge? It's there. You can find it in books. It is not the only story. It is not the only path a character can take or does take in this day and age. I have seen the Iliad through that lens, through a very classic, and that's a weird thing to say because it is a classic, but I've seen it through a very classic lens. And I'm curious to see how I feel about it, reading it myself with my own two eyes without the input of someone else and just kind of sitting with the text itself. So I'm excited about it. The Iliad. My reread, I'm very excited about. Look at all those tabs. A couple of years ago in a blustery January, I read Sylvia Townsend Warner's Lolly Willows. Now, if you are a member of Book of the Month, I didn't know this until I became a member, but if you are a member of Book of the Month, they give out an award for Best Book of the Year. The award that they give out for that is called the Lolly, because Lolly Willows was the very first book so long ago in its first iteration of existence that Book of the Month sold. And it's a wild one. I loved this so much. It is, bear with me now, a book about a woman in the, I'm gonna say, late 1910s, early 1920s, I think, somewhere in there, turn of the century, but definitely the 1900s side of things, 20th century, very early 20th century, in England, who sells her soul to the devil to get a little peace and freedom. I know that there are so many theological issues with this book, but it is so beautiful and it is so thought-provoking. It's not enticing anyone to sell their soul to the devil. It's just a really wonderful book it's a wonderful commentary on what a single woman has to do to get a little freedom at that time. It is just a commentary on the extreme things that she must do in order to be autonomous. It's great. It's really, really great. It reads like an adult fairy tale. Very wonderful. My Sophie Kinsella this month is a book I don't own a physical copy of. It is Can You Keep a Secret? They've made a movie out of this one. I think this was her first book under the name Sophie Kinsella, and it is not my fave. Not my fave. I've read it once and I've seen the movie a couple of times because I see the movie on offer and I'm like, oh, I'd probably like that. And I watch it and I'm disappointed every single time, but I still keep doing it because what is that? The definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over, but expecting different results. I'm crazy for Sophie Kinsella. So I've seen the movie and that may be clouding my opinion of the book. I might really like the book a whole lot more, but it is her early work. And I don't tend to love her early work as much as I enjoy her later work. It's the characters are a lot less likable in her early work, in my opinion, anyway. And the situations they find themselves in are a lot more icky, in my opinion, than they do in the later work. So I'm just going to read this one, get it out of the way, and I'm following it up next month with one of my absolute favorites. So, balance. It's all about balance. So I'm going to reread Can You Keep a Secret by Sophie Kinsella. It will be my second read of this, and we'll see if I feel differently about it than I do right now. Another book I own a physical copy of, but could not find for the life of me this morning. I must have put May books in a stack somewhere in my office, and it's underneath something. You don't even want to know what the office in this house looks like. So it's probably underneath like poster boards and stuff like that, teacher paraphernalia, and I just couldn't find it this morning. So I have a little healthy stack of books that I will be reading that are probably all together somewhere and I can't find them right now. But I will be reading Ellen Montgomery's Pat of Silverbush. This is a duology. I'll read the second one in June, Mistress Pat. I remember a whole lot more about Mistress Pat than I do about Pat of Silverbrush, but I know that this is a really sweet story. The first one, she's a girl, and in the second one, she's a woman. And in this first one, we just meet her, and I don't think she's an orphan. I think she is just a child living with her family on a farm in, I think, Nova Scotia. And there's cats involved, and a woman who helps in the kitchen, who tells her stories, and I remember something about a cabbage patch. Just really cute stuff. You know, classic L.M. Montgomery. I don't think this gets weird with witches and stuff like Emily of New Moon, which I will also, we might as well do it now, also be reading. So I will be reading the final book in the Emily trilogy, Emily's Quest. Fun fact, when I was a teenager, I loved this story so much and needed it to go just one step further, and I wrote, before I even knew what it was, before online existed, before the internet was available to all human beings at the touch of their hand, I wrote fan fiction. I wrote Emily Conquers. And it will never, ever see the light of day. So I will be reading Emily's Quest and ending her story there. If you have not been following my TBRs, you may not know about Emily of New Moon, which is the second most popular, I think, or most well-known of L.M. Montgomery's young orphan girl characters. There is, of course, Anne of Green Gables, and then there is Emily, and I do feel like there are two camps, people who prefer Anne and people who prefer Emily. I love Anne. I love Anne with my whole heart, but Emily is my girl. Yeah, Emily is my girl. It's a little bit darker. It's a little bit weirder. There's some very complicated things that happen emotionally, socially, relationally. There's some mental illness. There's a lot of betrayal and hurt and joy, a lot of joy, and a lot of fun. And I just think that she is not necessarily a relatable character, but a more consistently interesting character than Anne. Anne kind of becomes two-dimensional throughout our time over those, 7 books. Emily stays powerful to the end, to the point where I didn't want it to end, right? I can't be the only girl who read these and wrote fan fiction. I can't be. In fact, probably if I went online, I could probably find some people's fan fiction, but I'm not going to. Not gonna do it. We're gonna end it with Emily's Quest. I am going to read another one that I could not find my copy of. It's probably with Emily and the Iliad, is The Tale of Hilltop Farm by Susan Wittig Albert. I keep looking down because I have my computer open in front of me. I'm learning to have my computer open in front of me during these. So Susan Wittig Albert has written I think, I haven't read them yet, but I think delightful mystery series, cozy mystery series with anthropomorphized animals, which is not usually my thing, but I'm into it for this, that live at Hilltop Farm, which is Beatrix Potter's farm. And Beatrix Potter is a character in this, and then all the little animals that live around her, they're real life animals on her farm. They're not like characters she's drawing, but they speak with each other. I don't think they speak to her, but they might. And there are mysteries that happen, and they help her either directly or indirectly, they help her solve these mysteries. And I've just heard wonderful things about this series, and I'm hoping that I love it. I hope it's something that I can continue on with until I've read all of them. There's quite a few. But the first one is The Tale of Hilltop Farm. Okay, I have a historical fiction that I'd like to read. I want to read Julia Kelly's The Last Dance of the Debutante, a novel. I have not heard of Julia Kelly. I think she's a pretty well-known writer. Yeah, just reading about her, it says she's an Emmy-nominated producer, journalist, marketing professional, and tea waitress. She lives in Los Angeles, Iowa, and New York, and she's written quite a lot, and I've never read her before. This is about a young woman in England who receives an invitation to the very last debutante ball that the Queen, in this case, Queen Elizabeth II, will be hosting. And this is true. The balls did go on for some time, but of course the story itself is fiction. And this character, Lily is her name, she is excited to be swept up into this world of balls and debutante stuff, whatever debutantes do, being presented and coming out to the world as an eligible young woman. She befriends 2 very different kind of polar opposite type of debutantes. One might be hiding secrets, and the other is very like bubbly and warm and effervescent and everything is on the, you know, she is what she says on the tin. Then she finds out some kind of secret about her family, and that causes her to have to make some decisions about something. And I don't want to know any more than that. In fact, that might be a little bit too much information for me. But I'm excited to read this. It's got really big font, and I was given it as a gift, and so I am interested to read it just so I can talk about it with my friend who gave it to me. I am going to read, provided that I have read the second book in this trilogy. I want to pick up the third book in the following month. So this might be a June read. I'm hoping it's a May read because I'm hoping that I can get books read in April. But if not, I'll be reading Belonging. So I might be reading Belonging. But if I read Belonging in April like I'm supposed to, then I'll be reading Moving On, which is the third book in this trilogy about 3 different women who go to the Scottish Highlands to kind of find themselves and start life over and live the simple life and find themselves in these small little communities that change who they are in very positive ways. I loved the first book. I know I'll love the second and the third books, and I need to just pick them up and read them. For my 12 and 12 challenge, my friend Jenny and former boss, but we're friends now. We were friends then too, but she's not my boss anymore. She suggested I read My Dark Vanessa, and I said, okay. This is a book I've been avoiding. I do think that as a loosely fictionalized account of an individual's life, this same kind of story has been told in a much more powerful but less publicized way already in a previous book that I have experienced, and that was enough for me. It's not the kind of story that I like reading about, especially as a teacher, but I went ahead and said yes, and part of the reason why I said yes was because A, I trust Jenny, and 2, because A and 2, yeah, that works. 2, because this is like part of pop culture now. Like everybody knows about this book. Everybody's read this book. I haven't read this book. So I'm going to give it a shot. If it is too ick, then for whatever reason, there are a million reasons why it might be too ick, I will probably put it down. We'll see. We'll see how it goes. I was supposed to pick this up in March and I didn't, but I really do want to prioritize it. And so I am putting it on this month's reading list. And this is reading list. I've been making summer reading lists for students. TBR. This month's TBR. This is the third and final book in the Wildwood trilogy. I am planning, you know how much I love Wildwood, and I am planning on making Wildwood a read aloud with my 8th graders in the coming year, but probably not the second and third book. But I do want to have at least finished the third book so that I can recommend it to certain students. I want to hopefully get to, provided I've read the second book in April, I want to read the third and final book, The Sweet Far Thing by Libba Bray. This is a chunky book, but these read very quickly. I'm pretty positive that I will definitely read the second book in that trilogy in April, even if it's the last book I read in April. I really want to know what happens. I really think it's an easy read. I really think that if I just have the time to sit down and do it, it will be wonderful. I have a handful of pre-orders that aren't here yet, but I wanted to show you just all the ones I own first. So I am going to read The Ladies Rewrite the Rules by Suzanne Allen or Elaine. This is the woman who wrote Mr. Malcolm's List, which was just in both movie and book form a little meh for me, but I think that or a little flat, but I think that was just the story itself. I think I do enjoy her writing. This is very short, and I had some credit that I could use, and so I went ahead and picked this one up and the next one that you'll see as well. I love this cover, and also it's fairly floppy. Berkeley Publishers is just coming out with some really great books recently that really appealed to me. And so I decided, you know what, it's basically free because I have this credit, so I might as well take a chance. And I got this one, The Ladies Rewrite the Rules. This one is about a young socialite, wealthy widow, but she's very young. And she ends up finding out that she has been put on a list. This is the early 1820s. She's been put on a list of eligible, young, wealthy women that has been distributed to the poor but high class, but without money, high in ranking, low in funding individuals. She is upset about this, and she confronts the man who publishes the list, who happens to be, of course, a young, cute bachelor without any funding. And he's like, it's for people like me who are the youngest sons who will never be able to afford to get married unless they marry somebody rich. And so if we have a list of all the rich women, we can meet them and find one that we could love and then marry them. And she says, no, you are trying to take advantage of us. You're trying to marry us and steal our money. And so the ladies rewrite the rules, and I don't know how, but that's what it's called. So I think that's what happens. Sounds fun, sounds light, sounds like my kind of story. The other one I picked up with my credit is this one, which I also think is so beautiful, which is also floppier than the other one. This one is not published by Berkeley. This is Dell. This is The Phoenix Bride by Natasha Siegel. I've never read anything by this author. I've never even heard of this author or of this book. I think it's fairly new release, or maybe it's a fairly new release in paperback. But this one takes place in the 1660s, right before the Great Fire in London, and it is about a Jewish man who has fled Portugal to find sanctuary somewhere where he won't be, this is during, I believe, the Spanish Inquisition. And so it's somewhere where he won't be attacked for his religion or culture. And he finds himself in London, where he can live safely, but he feels still isolated and alone. And I don't know what he does. He's got some kind of job, but he ends up working for a man who has a daughter, and he and this daughter start to fall in love. But for both of them, it's a forbidden romance because he is Jewish, and maybe also for other reasons. I'm not sure. So I'm just very curious about this story. It sounds a little bit Romeo and Juliet-esque, but maybe with more romance and less ick, and more history. And I'm curious, I'm interested, and I'm hoping that I love it. It sounds like something that I could love. I have some nonfiction. I have two nonfiction that I'm rereading. I'm actually rereading them now, but I'm sure that it will take me longer to finish them, and I do want to finish them before the end of, and so I have put them on my list even though I've started reading them in April, and that is A CIA Analyst's Guide to Spotting Fake News, True or False by Sydney L. Otis. I will be teaching from this book in the upcoming school year, and so I want to, or I'll be using portions of it in the upcoming school year for our research unit, and I really want to, and am, rereading it for work, but I'm also really enjoying it, so I'm counting it as a read. It is, like I said, a reread, and I'm counting it for my personal reading and for my work reading this upcoming month. This is really great if you are looking. It's written for teens, but it doesn't talk down at all. It's very natural, and it is about a woman who is a CIA agent. She does research for the CIA on different cases on all kinds of topics, but it's how it's several things. It first goes back into proving that fake news has been around since the Egyptians, and why it has existed and how it has existed and how it has spread in different ways, and how the internet complicates the human ability to process. Like, we can process when it comes at a certain speed, but when it comes at the speed that's coming out now, that makes it very, very difficult. And then also it's about how she, as a CIA agent, decides what information is credible and what is not. And so that's the part that we'll really hone in on when I use this in my classroom. But for me personally, I really love the history stuff. So this is a great book, written for teens, but very, very, very applicable to adults. Everyone should read this book. Everyone should read this book. It should be required reading for being a human. I am also rereading and loving and annotating and trying to decide on a handful of essays to use with my class next year. John Green's The Anthropocene Reviewed. If you haven't read this, you really need to. It's so good. It's so, so good. I forget how good it is. The first time I read it for school, zoomed through it and went, wow, that's great. This time I'm really reading it, annotating things, really loving it, going slow, processing it, and just finding so much heart and warmth and wisdom and hope in this book. I'm only a couple of essays in, but it's just so good. It's so good. Even if you feel like, I mean, why would you be a reader and be here watching me? But I was going to say, even if you're not a reader, you should read this book. If you know people who are not readers, put this in their hands. It's good. It's good. And then this has been on a TBR before, but I am going to try again. I think it was on my November TBR, but I'm going to try again to read Soul Boom. I just didn't get to it, and I really want to. Why We Need a Spiritual Revolution by Rainn Wilson. After watching Rainn Wilson's short, I think 4-episode documentary series where he goes around trying to find out what makes the happiest and saddest places on earth the happiest and saddest places on earth, he also released this book. And I found his insights to be, I mean, if you don't know who Rainn Wilson is, he's the guy from The Office. But I found, just as a human being, as a curious, highly intelligent human being, I found his reflections and interactions with people to be very open and curious. And I think that that's the tone he'll take here, and I'm just interested in hearing what he is going to say. I don't know that it will be insightful, but I think it will be. Yeah, we'll give it a go. He's not a religious person, but he's wanting a spiritual revolution, and I don't know what he means by that, and I want to know. I want to know what he means by that. I have one more stack of books here that I'm gonna talk about, but they are for a very specific purpose. And if you've been around here for a while, you may know what's coming in May. You may know what's coming in May, or maybe you read the title of this and you already know what's coming in May, and I'm being silly and it doesn't matter. But before I show you that stack, I do want to talk about the books that I have pre-ordered that haven't come yet. Of course, there will be a book of the month choice. I don't know what it is. I'm not sponsored by Book of the Month. I just love them. I have always had pre-ordered, since last year I've had pre-ordered Ruth Ware's new one, which is One Perfect Couple, domestic thriller from Ruth Ware this time. I read every book Ruth Ware puts out. I don't buy every book Ruth Ware puts out, but this one, I don't remember the synopsis very well. I read it many months ago, but it appealed to me. So I ordered that one. And then I have ordered, oh no, this one is just for my library. Whoops, this is not a pre-order. I have this on hold for my library, but it hasn't been released yet. This is Emily Henry's Funny Story, which I personally have sworn off Emily Henry, but this is because I just don't enjoy her books at all. I know, I've read them. I've read Beach Read, People We Meet on Vacation, and Happy Place, and I did not like any of them at all. But I'm gonna read Funny Story because this is the Jennifer Brooks book for this month. So I'm gonna go ahead and read that one, or at least give it a try. I tend to like the first half and then hate the second half of Emily Henry books. So we'll see how far I get. I have full license to DNF if I so choose. The other 3 books that I have pre-ordered, so I've only pre-ordered 4, and I feel better about that as a human being. The other 3 books, I pre-ordered The Ministry of Time. This is a time travel-ish book. It is about a future time when we can time travel, but I don't think there's like a bureau of time travel. I don't think that people are traveling back and forth in time at all in this, though. I think a trainee is put into a dorm situation while learning about working for the bureau, and it has to room with a person from the 1800s, and I think it becomes a romance. I'm not sure. It sounds silly and fun. There is some controversy around this because it does share the name of a telenovela, but in reading the description of the telenovela and reading the description of the book, I found them to be entirely different except for the name. So I think people are freaking out about something that they actually don't know about. How strange. That never happens all the time. So I'm excited to read this, and I don't think it is at all like the telenovela. So yeah, The Ministry of Time, excited to read this. Also, happy to support an author that seems to be getting a lot of flack for things that are not true. And then this is the other one that I saw, and I was like, ooh, I want to read that. This is Every Time I Go on Vacation, Someone Dies by Catherine Mack. I love this title. I would hate it if that happened to me, but I love this title. This, as I read about it, it felt like it might have the same kind of tone as The Aunties. Totally different author, totally different scenario, but it had that same kind of slapstick feel, at least in the descriptions that I read. I don't know. I've never read anything by Catherine Mack, and this is the first in a series, or what will be a series. And so I don't know if I'm going to love it, but I think that this is a book that also has like regifting value. And so if I don't love it, I'll just give it to somebody else as a gift at some point, because I do think that it's got those qualities. I am looking forward to reading this though. I really I want to read it right now. Like I want to just sit down and read it. It hasn't been released yet, but I want to read it now. Yeah, I think it's going to be super fun. It is, like it says, about a woman. She's an author. She writes mysteries, and every time she takes a vacation, someone dies. And so she writes mysteries, but she also will be a sleuth solving mysteries on her vacations. I pre-ordered a long time ago, The Last Murder at the End of the World by Stuart Turton. Now, Stuart Turton wrote The Devil and the Deep Blue Sea, something like that. The Devil in the Water, the historical fiction one that takes place on the boat. But he also wrote The 7.5 Deaths of Evelyn Hardcastle, which, after my sister finally made me read it, I absolutely loved it. It is so weird and so impossible to figure out what's going on in that book. And if you like thrillers, murder mysteries, and surprising twists and turns, then and you can suspend reality a little bit, there's some magical realism going on in there as well, then that is the book for you. But I really enjoy his writing style. His two books that I've read by him are incredibly different from each other, and yet both have that like impossible to figure out what's going on element to them. This one, I think, is a dystopian set in the future about an island, and that's all I know. Maybe there's a murder based on the title. I don't know. I want to go into it without knowing pretty much anything except that the author is Stuart Turton. So I'm excited about this. I'm primed for it. I'm ready. I've been waiting for it, and I will definitely read that in May. Okay, so that is everything that I am going to read except for the 4 books that I'm going to read this year for Mary Shelley May. Yay! Mary Shelley May. I've been hosting Mary Shelley May for a handful of people for several years now. And I'm going to keep doing it, but I'm simplifying it this year because, as you have heard, I don't have any time to read. So I am going to just have 4 books that I have that are Mary Shelley related that I'm really excited to read. I don't have a bingo board. I don't have prompts. I don't have anything. If you want to read anything by or about Mary Shelley, let's read it together in May. Let's talk about it in May. Use the hashtag Mary Shelley May 2024, and we can still have a little read along, but it's super low key this year, and hopefully next year I can up my game again. But for now, we've got 4 books for Mary Shelley May. I'm going to read 2 short stories by Mary Shelley. Again, this is a book that I could not find this morning, but that I do own. And it's just a bind up of 2 short stories. One is called The Mortal Immortal. It's from 1833, and it's about this guy who drinks this elixir that makes him immortal. And I don't know anything else about it, but I'm going to read it. I think it's more like a novella. And then the other is an essay in there that she wrote that was published in a magazine in the 1820s about ghosts and the lack of ghosts in fiction at her time, and how she really wished there were more ghosts in fiction during her life because reasons, and I'll find out the reasons. I'm really interested in reading this essay. When I found this little Signet Classics bind up of these 2 longer short works, I was really excited. I think that that essay is going to be the highlight of May. And then a couple of years ago, the first year that I did Mary Shelley May, I read the first book in this middle grade series. This is The Wollstonecraft Detective Agency #2, The Case of the Girl in Grey by Jordan Stratford and Kelly Murphy. And I really loved the first. Now, this suspends reality by making Ada Lovelace and Mary Shelley, Mary Godwin in this book, because they're two kids, by making them equals in age. So it takes the daughter of Lord Byron and it takes the future wife of Percy Shelley and makes them friends. And they start a detective agency and they solve crimes. The book is full of these gorgeous full page illustrations. I mean, these books are just things of beauty. There are so many. I'd say there's probably like 20 to 30 of these in every book. There are 4 books in the series total. As far as I can tell, they are not being written anymore, which makes me sad because they are really, really wonderful. So I'm going to read the second book in the series, and this is The Case of the Girl in Grey. And if you look, you can see there in the mausoleum a little shadow person. And what was really fun about these was the way that pop culture was worked into them. Like there's a little boy in the first one who's causing trouble in the streets and doing all sorts of wild things, and it turns out that he's Charles Dickens in little boy form, causing all these problems, doing all these pranks and things. It's just really lovely for adults, and I think middle graders would also love it. But I'll be reading this for Mary Shelley May, and then I'm going to read a book I got with Christmas money this year. I'm going to read Lady Carolyn Lamb by Antonia Fraser. This is a very short biography of Carolyn Lamb. Last year, I read Carolyn Lamb's book that she wrote, Carnarvon? I think that's what it's called, something like that. The book that she wrote in response to the way that Lord Byron broke things off with her. They were having an affair and he broke things off with her. She was an unhinged Regency woman. And I want to know more about her. And Antonia Fraser is a pretty balanced biographer. And so I am very, very interested in reading this biography. And then I'm going to read, finally, the final book. Not finally, I'm reading this. I went back and forth on this. I hemmed and hawed on this because Rachel Hawkins wrote a book based on Jane Eyre that completely disgusted me. I have decided that maybe I'm just a little too close to Jane Eyre. The characters in it being as villainous as she made them, as broken and as awful and as harmful to themselves and others as she made them. I hated that book. I hated it with my whole being. I hated it. And I don't feel that way about most books. So I went back and forth about whether or not I was going to read this one. As I read the synopsis, it annoys me. But we will see. A lot of people really enjoy this. This is The Villa, and it's supposed to be based on the Manson murders, the summer that Percy and Mary joined Byron in the Villa, Switzerland, and also Fleetwood Mac. So it's supposed to be all of those things in one book. And here's what annoys me. So I'm just going to read you the back of this one. It says, as kids, Emily and Chess were inseparable. But by their 30s, their bond had been strained by the demands of their adult lives. So when Chess suggests a girl's trip to stay at a fabled villa in Italy, Emily jumps at the chance to reconnect with her best friend. That's fine. That's all fine. In 1974, rock and roll legend Noel Gordon, Lord Byron, Gordon, rents Villa Rosata for the summer. In an attempt to reignite his creative spark, Noel invites up-and-coming musician Percy Sheldon, as well as Pierce's girlfriend, Mary, M-A-R-I, Mary, and her stepsister, Clara or Claire to come along. Before the summer is over, Mari will write one of the greatest horror novels of all time, Frankenstein. Lara will compose a platinum album, I don't know where that comes from, and Pierce will be brutally murdered. Also, don't know where that comes from. As the Manson murders, probably. As Emily digs into the villa's complicated history, she begins to think that perhaps Pierce's murder wasn't just a tale of sex, drugs, and rock and roll gone wrong, but that something more sinister might have occurred, and that there might be clues hidden in the now iconic work that Mari and Lara left behind. Yet as secrets from the past come to light, equally dangerous materials from the present also emerge. Soon Emily begins to wonder, will the villa claim another victim before the summer ends? Like I said, inspired by Fleetwood Mac, the Manson murders, and the infamous summer that Percy and Mary Shelley spent with Lord Byron at Lake Geneva Castle, the birthplace of Frankenstein, the villa welcomes you into its deadly legacy. So this has the potential to be either enthralling and fun and enough of an original story to be a great thriller, or really, really upsetting to me as it plays with the lives and a time that I know well historically. So we'll see how that goes. Those are the things that I plan on reading in the month of May. If you're going to read anything Mary Shelley related, let me know. I played with the idea of trying to reread Frankenstein. It's been a few years, but I decided I wasn't going to do it, but I highly recommend you do it. That would be awesome. And then if you're going to read any of these other books, let me know, or if you've read any of them. And then we'll also just see how many of them actually get read and how many of them get pushed to June because of April reads. It happens. It happens. We make plans and we're flexible. We'll get to all the books that we want to get to someday, somehow, eventually, maybe, probably not. But on the way, we'll read a lot of really great books. Anyway, I'm gonna go, so let's go read.